So now it's the formal part of our breakfast presentation. And we've got Andrew Gutteridge. Andrew is an Arkhefield founder and principal. Andrew drives the design direction of the practice. His extensive skills and experience in providing strategic direction and managing the design process ensures a keen vision and a strong leadership for the design studio. Andrew is an advocate of the architectural profession and construction industry. Andrew is a leader in leading a charge towards change and innovation in design fields. Just over breakfast, Andrew pointed out, I should have had on news there, Student 1 Tower on Queen Street currently holds the world's tallest building status for student housing. So that's kind of nice to have a world's tallest building in Brisbane at the moment. But apparently someone in Melbourne is building one 2 metres taller. So at the moment it's the world's tallest student housing building. So would you please welcome Andrew to the stage. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you all for coming. As introduced, yes, I am a founder and principal of Arkhefield, and have a number of Arkefielders here today. Gavin Ranger in particular, welcome, and Graham Nottle. And while I'm at it, Frank's here somewhere. Is Frank here? Frank and Wenger here also, who worked on the project on the way through. But welcome and thanks for coming. This is a 4.5-year story, so there's a long story to this. And the start of it would be the collaborators and who we worked for. Grocon, of course, were our developer and client along the way, and we have a history with Grocon, which I'll show you a bit of. AAA is Arkhefield, ARM and Archipelago. ARM is Ashton Raggett McDougall, which is a Melbourne architectural practice. The A is Steve Ashton, who, again, I'll acknowledge, Steve passed away during this project, so he was an integral part of certainly ARM, but certainly Arkhefield as well. 15 years of collaboration there. And Archipelago is Brendan Poynton and Peter Edwards. Peter, a lot of you will know, is a very well-respected and impactful urbanist in Brisbane. Lastly, landscape architecture by LAT 27. I'm sure there's a lot of LAT 27 lovers here, but they're a great collaborator of ours as well, and we're integral to this whole process, as you'll see. Finally, Shape Shift, who is here, which I would also put in there clearly as collaborators on this project, which you'll see as well. Quick history. ARM, Arkhefield have been Arkefield's its own practice, ARM's its own practice. The collaboration though has been going for 15 years. So we did the tax building in Albert Street and the TNG upgrade of the TNG building and all that stuff. We also, just before this project, we're doing the master plan for the Brisbane Airport, one of the master plans, and this was the first AAA. So this is where Arkhefield, Archipelago and ARM came together, and Arkhefield and ARM were the bridesmaids for the 1 William Tower. So both propositions went up to Campbell Newman and they went to CBUS, primarily because they had money in their pocket. But, so there's a bit of history there. The history on the games goes back. Archipelago actually worked for the very first bid to try and get the games here in 2011. The first master plan was made by Peter Edwards, and then we entered the competition. So then it was a competition to deliver the Games Village at minimum cost to the state government was the brief. 6,500 beds, plus all the village amenities, which I'll go through in a minute. We entered with Grocon, rolled out of the 1 William Street bid, went straight into this bid and were successful. And then right through to the Legacy Master Plan, because it's in the actual health knowledge precinct of the Gold Coast, which I'll take you through in a minute. The sites, the yellow side of course, that's a PDA, so that was declared a PDA and was one of the earlier PDAs. PDA is a state government planning instrument, so it wraps a band around a piece of land and says all other rules are off. You deal with EDQ and the state government, and it sets a vision and it sets a whole lot of prescriptive criteria that you've got to work for. Around the PDA, the red line is what's declared as the Gold Coast Health Knowledge Precinct. It's a bit like Hurston or Bogger Road. It's got a knowledge base. It's got another brief over the top of it. It's driven to create a centre driven by knowledge. And then within the Health Knowledge Precinct, the green is the hospital site. This is Griffith Uni, and this was the Parklands site. This is a bit of Griffith Uni over here. So the blue is our site, the PDA, and it was the original Parklands racetrack. It's where a lot of Live Aid events happened, and it was simply a racetrack and a greenfield site. Huge amount of impetus out of the Health Knowledge Precinct and great economic benefit, and so a lot of drivers about the legacy and what the legacy of this area would lead to. So state government sets that up, puts over the top of it the need to deliver the Athletes Village at minimum cost for state government, but within a precinct that's driven by a whole lot of economics to take it forward. The Common Games itself has another whole lot of set of drivers and economics over the top of it. The point of that is that to pick up the competition, we had multiple clients. We had the state government and the driver of the Health Knowledge Precinct with two huge burly neighbours, being the hospital and the university. We had a developer that had a development brief and a business model to achieve. We had the Commonwealth Games Federation, which is a global federation which gave you books and books and books on what a village must deliver. And the simple job for the competition was to meld all those things together and finish it. The competition didn't last very long. I think it was only 4 or 5 weeks, 8 or 9 teams, and primarily the Grocon bid differentiated itself because it was 100% permanent. So 1,200 apartments delivered in one line, permanent. The typical Athletes Village would be put into a residential establishment of a university or something, all the students would be kicked out for 3 weeks, and they build hundreds of dongers, or ship in the dongers and have like a mining camp. That certainly is a good description of Glasgow, which was the year before, the games before this, and even Melbourne. There was a lot of permanent housing, but basically in between the permanent housing they just filled in all the gaps with dongers. Many of the other competitors went for that. Grocon walked in and said, no, we'll build 1,200 permanent residential apartments. The driver was to deliver exactly what they did, which was the first build-to-rent REIT, Residential Investment Trust. So let's set up 1,200 apartments in a key worker area next to a university and a hospital and on a train line, and we'll sell it to the world in one line, which is what they did. So the whole village, the whole 1,200 apartments were sold to a consortium halfway through construction, and then Goldock is the first renter, renting it back for a period of time, and then it'll be turned into 1,200 apartments. So I'll talk to that in a sec. We often talk about different clients in the way we do our work, and the client being the person paying us and giving us the briefs is our least influential client, we often say, controversially. But the client often comes with the desires and a whole lot of and an idea of what they can do. But the real client in the end becomes the site. The site is the site is the site. It's unchangeable, it's completely knowable. It's what we work with, it's what will make the decisions at the end of the day. And the authorities, the regulations before it. So being a PDA, EDQ had set up a structure plan. So the whole site is this area. We've got Smith Street at the bottom, Parklands Drive, the university's here, and the hospital's up the top. And this was basically the structure plan from EDQ, but it's got a few significant points on. The train stop for the Gold Coast Light Rail was here. There was a link road that was part of the bigger, broader infrastructure, which was called Hospital Boulevard, that had to go in. And obviously you had to link through from Hospital Boulevard up to the station, which was called Main Street. And of course there was a parklands requirement and it's an overland flow area. It used to be a creek straight through here, a little bigger creek, so it's the bottom of the hill in an overland flow area. All good directions, but all good problems. So we always start with the site, and we always look at the site for our clues. This site's in this really interesting place, sort of halfway between the beach and the hinterland, which is the transect of the topography of the Gold Coast. Whenever you think of the Gold Coast, you've got to think of the hinterland and the rainforest, and it drops straight down through the Wallam, then to the beach and the sea. So the transect, and again, this is a bit of lap 27 thinking, but started off quite early because we're sort of thinking about the site. And when you walk on the site, it is just a grassland. But this made us think of what is the qualities of the Gold Coast, and started a conversation about the qualities of the Gold Coast. And you do have, up in the hinterland, the waterfalls and the creeks, in the Numbulbar Valley, all the way down to the beaches. And those thoughts sort of started feeding through, as well as the ecology of the water on the site, which was intense. It was a major overland floodway. The creek was there originally. Parts of it was put into culverts, but it still carried a lot of water. So we had to take all those on, and then the Gold Coast itself, or Surfers Paradise. And one of the earliest observations came from a John Gollings exhibition, which was on at the time. John Gollings is a very well-known architectural photographer, but in the 70s, when he was a student, he did a couple of weeks on the Gold Coast and took photos of that old Gold Coast that a lot of us remember, with all the neon and the lights and the big hats and the big sunglasses, and it was an enormously colourful, effusive place. And then he went back about 6 years ago and took the same photographs in the same places and did an exhibition on the Gold Coast in the 70s and Gold Coast now. And the differences were stark. All the colour had gone, all the life had gone out of the Gold Coast. Even the people, the big hats had gone, the pink poodle had gone. A lot of the colours had been brought back, bagged up and salmon pink painted. And that was learning from Surfers Paradise exhibition was at the time. So that started to impact us, as you'll see in a second. And the then and now the Gold Coast became a way of talk. So this is the best way to try and explain what is a athlete's village, because we have a site and the brief is to do an athlete's village, but we've actually got to create the roads, we've got to create the lots, we've got to do the civil work, we've got to put all the access in, and then we've got to have the end game vision of an athlete's village, but on the way through build 1,200 apartments that'll be at the end of the day. So the best way to think about an athlete's village is that it's locked off, as it will be as of this weekend, into a secure zone. So it's like an airport. Border Force takes over. The venues are all scattered around, so 6,500 athletes have to come in, 6,500 athletes have to be housed. The buses that transport them to training and to stuff are intense, so there's over 30 bus parks and a full transport network of 30 buses. They come off and they go through a welcome zone. This is basically scanners, just like an airport, tickets, they pass around the neck. Once they've got it, becomes their way through. They get processed through here. The moment they come out of here, all they want to do is eat. 6,500 athletes who train, they eat a lot, 5 meals a day. They have to go straight into the dining hall and be fed, and I'll show you a bit of the dining hall later. And then once they get out of the dining hall, they go to sleep. And you've got to find 6,500 beds for 72 different nationalities, and they've all got to be contained. Each of the nationalities has then got admin teams and corp de gears and all these people that come with them, all that need officers. And then everything for the 6,500 athletes has to be provided, from the medical provisions, the gyms, the haircuts, the cafes, the post offices. You have to put the whole lot inside the boundary and house them for a month. So that's the best way to think of it. So that was one brief, to satisfy the CGV. The second one was the health knowledge precinct, so the university and the hospital. Not great friends, they both want everything. Both heavy stakeholders at the table wanting what they want. And we're not only master planning the CGV and the 1200, we've got to actually finish off the health knowledge precinct for the two of them. So this diagram is famous. It came up really early on. The big armature of arms is containing all the residential. It faces northeast, looks onto the Green Park. So it's a very clean and obvious diagram. Health gets a street here called Health Street, and their buildings go along there. Main Street connects it through to the railway station, and Knowledge runs along Smith Street and creates a city. One of the big impacts that we had early on was there was a huge zip-through flyover here in the original plan, all the different ramps. And the logic of that was that this was still freeway land and a freeway, and the Gold Coast started up here somewhere before you got to Southport. We basically put the idea in play, if you like, that the Gold Coast actually should start up here. You should stop it being a freeway back here, reduce it by 10 kilometres an hour and get rid of the flyovers and just put in intersections. Which one? Apart from the fact it saved $350 million, it was logic. And that was part of this logic, to make a street, not to make a freeway. So this is one of the really early master plans. The red line is the PDA. All of this is required for the village. So at this point we understood the problem we had. At this point we had over 20 eight-storey buildings to build. And we had to lay them out, we had to create streets. There's about 150 townhouses scattered through it. Main Street's up here, Hospital Boulevard through there, there's Smith Street coming through here. The Knowledge Precinct, the Health Precinct, all transecting, and Main Street coming down. Always an idea of a retail heart and a supermarket, because we're building 1,200 things. And the big parkland, which had the overland flow precinct through it. At this stage we were pretty aware of the problem. We were getting hit from every stakeholder on the way through. How do we build this cheaply and get it done? The new owner was showing up, represented by Savills, who wanted a long-term, high-end investment that they were going to own for a long time, and 12 apartments. Health wanted everything, Uni wanted everything, PDA wanted everything, and we were in the middle. The thing we needed was something to galvanise everyone, some vision or some object or something that everyone suddenly would get value out of, including the people of the Gold Coast and including the people of Brisbane. A memorable object for the athletes to photograph themselves in, and something to make a place out of this rather nebulous place. So we started looking around the world at different place-making things. This is one of about 10 places we found, a place called La Victoire in Bordeaux. And it was simply a pattern on the ground, but it had a certain scale to it. And the thing we really liked was that the road, it actually impacted the road. The fact that there was a public place, it had a shape, and the road followed the shape. And we thought we liked that as architects, and we thought that's impactful. But it was also a good scale. So when we put it on Hospital Boulevard and Main Street, that place was about that size, and we liked the size of it, and we were moving quickly and had to find something. So it showed up on a landscape plan quite early on, and because of that early transect idea of the Gold Coast, the beach was a bit, just a long linear thing, but Numbaba Valley and the Natural Arch. Does anyone know the Natural Arch up in Numbaba Valley? When it rains, the creek falls through the roof of the cave and into the cave underneath. Very memorable place, certainly a memorable place from my childhood. At some presentation, somewhere along the line, we mentioned that, and that place a little bit showed up, and this circle showed up, and we thought, well, look, we could build a big disc, and we could put all the water on top of it, fall it through a gap, and celebrate the Natural Arch. That idea stuck. It showed up on the next plan as a 30-metre wide disc. This room's probably 15, it could get to 20, right? So 30 is another 10 metres that way. And it's completely round, and the idea was simply to build a big disc and put water on top of it and pour it all through the oculus and celebrate the Numbaba Valley as an iconic place. Said it again. We said it at a thing, and we said it in front of politicians and they heard it, and everyone started referring to it as the disc. That was the earliest shot of the disc that I can find. Another thing showed up, you can still see it here, on another place we found somewhere in Italy. It wasn't enough to have the disc, we had to have a containment of the disc. We had to catch the place with another object, being something that went around the outside of that. That's about a 60 metre, 70 metre circle. And as you can see in this one, we then let the buildings follow that shape. So this is actually the earliest master plan. This is what got signed up. This is what got sold to EDQ. This is what got sold to the consortium that bought the unit. And everyone loved it, except then we had to build this thing. That's what it looked like. And that was the earliest sort of evocative utopian picture of it. This went on to the front cover of reports. This went to ministers. This went everywhere. And the only thing they could remember, of course, once they came back, was this fantastic disc. Like, where's the disc? Like, the impression we got was everyone important just ripped the one photo out, stuck it in their pockets, and just kept saying to people, "We want the disc." And the arbour, as it got caught. And as you know, at this stage, that arbour is running around the outside, leaping over the road, zigzagging in to become the foyers of those three buildings and coming back over the other side. Typical architects having fun in an early stage of the project. You can see the buildings have certainly different sort of ideas to them, and we flat-topped at this stage. So it was a 10-storey limit in the area, but 8 storeys is what was safe without sprinkling, so we're 8-storey buildings. So we just went for 8-storey buildings everywhere. 18 of them. Urban design principles came in, and the famous arm diagram continued. Typical urban design strategies got applied. We had to lay out streets, we had to create lots, we had to make streets, we had to design the widths, design the corners. One of the big famous wins was again the 5 metre left turn. If you've got a garbage truck or a big truck coming in, if you turn from the right-hand side of the road this way, you've got all the road to turn the big truck. But if you turn left, you need a 25 metre radius to get the truck around. So traffic engineers will try and give you a 25 metre radius on every corner so a big truck can turn every corner, which makes these huge intersections. We just banned left turns. We said no truck can turn left. We only need a 5 metre radius. And that war went on for a while, but we won that you're not allowed to turn left in a big truck in the Parklands. And therefore we get 5 metre radiuses, which are very pedestrian friendly. This is, I think, the first legacy master plan. So once we've worked out the 1,200 units, we then had to put the health buildings in. The private hospital's being built. This is the big hospital. This is the uni. There's the knowledge precinct. And that started looking like that. So the hospital, the uni, the private hospital, and this was all the possible legacy vision. So EDQ, state government, Gold Coast City Council, all interested in the legacy. They want to see the future. They want to see where we're going with. They want to see that our village is not going to interrupt the future, and that this massive investment in health and knowledge can be realised. So we have a brief from Goldup out from EDQ as the master plan of the health knowledge precinct. We have Goldup, we have CTB, we have all the different heads. So you can see this is basically where we ended up. 100 townhouses, 120 townhouses scattered through here. All those buildings underneath one are on what's called Lot E and F. One basement under here. This is Lot D, all that's under one basement. Then you can see the disc showing up. Lot A and B, stretching along there, 2 basements. Here's Lot C, with the supermarket under there, with the green zone on top, so these guys can look out on it. And then this is all what's going to happen in the future. And here's the goal to get to the G transport. Problem being that once we've done our village, not only the athletes but everyone else is walking all the way up here and through empty paddocks because there will be no buildings there. So we developed a strategy of this is the main street we ended up building, and we'll get to the colours and the building in a second, but basically what this shows, I think, that building there is that building there. So you can see from that building all the way up the main street, past the Heart, all the way up the main street up to here, which was a really important early principle to connect visually all the different residential. So you can see the building in the past, you can see the arbour, you can see the corner of the disc, you can see the main street, but these buildings are ours and they're on EDQ land. So for all those other things, being the cafe and the hairdresser and the post office and the bar and all those things that were required by the village, which could be in tents by Moreton Hire, we proposed what's called temporary permanents. We'd build them as cheaply as we could out of blockwork, and they would be on sites that were zoned for 10-storey health buildings, but they'd hold the main street. So you'd at least have a street to walk up to the shops, up to the station. Both during the games, the athletes would have an active high street, if you like, and then after the games, they could rent those out quite well and start the precinct and start Parklands. So that idea of the transept was important. The big arms and the wrapping around the Parklands, looking northeast with most of the things was important, and subtropical architecture and how to live well in this climate was important to us. So this is then taking, there's the arms, all facing northeast over this. Here's the high street coming up, and this was us putting on then all the tents and all the temporary buildings that needed to be put on in order to meet the Games Village brief, which is extensive. And quite early on, when we were doing the civil works, we had to plan the tents because each tent needed sewerage and power. So the conduits and the power connections to the sites of the tents, even though they weren't going to be buildings, had to be there underground, and they were all coordinated. And is it showing up yet? No, so it's still not really showing up. At this point, we still have this gap from these being real buildings, and then hundreds of metres of walk through no buildings to get up here, both during the games and afterwards. So the temporary permanent buildings ended up fitting in here and on this side, certainly on that side, and all the way up here, and this became the international zone, which I didn't mention before. On that early diagram I showed, the transport corridor, the welcome mat, and the international zone is outside the boundaries, if you like, but it's where dignitaries and visitors and mums and dads come to meet their kids or their family, or to see presentations, or for teams to be welcomed by the minister or the chairman, blah, blah, blah. All that happens in another zone, which is here, which is called the international zone. It's basically outside the cordon. So then we had the buildings, we had the clients, and we had a few things to play with, but because of the battle management and the pressures we were under, the buildings got simpler and simpler. They ended up being very square buildings, so the scaffolding was cheap. They're flat plates running up, and they're lightweight. So there's lightweight, basically FC walls with steel frame. So we took and went back to that idea of the Gold Coast having lost all its colour, and we presented this idea that we should bring the colour back to the Gold Coast, because colour is paint's in our control. It doesn't cost a lot. We had some budget for it. So we developed this idea that the heart would be in the middle, and the colour would dissipate out but link all the buildings together and make a precinct. We went back to the Gold Coast and looked at all the bits on the Gold Coast that we could use to identify colours, and invented a colourway, if you like, of a series of different colours and different tones. And the idea of the heart and this idea of dissipating the intensity of the heart out. At the same time, Grocom gave us and defined 4 facade types: painted panels, fins, and powder-coated aluminium balustrade details. And in the final approved budget, these were just single line items. So I just said powder-coated aluminium balustrades, 250,000 square metres. Fins, X linear metres. Painted panels, X. That's all it said. So we converted that, took that, gave it to us, and then just distributed the colours and the panels, not equally around the buildings, which is how the formula was done, but we just concentrated it on the corners where it had the most impact, and used that stuff to decorate our very simple buildings. And of course we we'd planted this seed of colour, but no one really understood the colour. No one really had a picture of the colour. They had that earlier picture with the heart in the middle, and the heart and the disc took everyone's attention. Everyone just wanted the disc. So I said, we're giving you the disc, and we'll get to that. The colour just slipped through. So as these buildings started getting built, the colours started showing up, which were all specified, and 10 different teams building 3 different buildings each. And that was, that's a pretty black picture of it all. So again, here's the temporary permanent buildings. Here's the transport mall. Here's where you come through and get processed into the dining hall underneath the supermarket. And the buildings started appearing on their super lots. The DNA appeared, the arbour, the Lap 27 landscape overland flow appeared, and the disc appeared. And no one really expected the colours. The colours became quite impactful. So this is looking down the main street as you arrive from the station at the top. Here's the disc at the bottom, and suddenly each of the teams building it started putting their colours up, and we started getting calls from everybody going, oh my God, where did the colours come from? And we'd reiterate the story. We'd say, look, we're reinventing the Gold Coast and we're bringing colour back to the Gold Coast. Have they always been there? Have the colours always been there? And of course they had. We had those strategies in there from the beginning, but no one ever really appreciated it. So the colours appeared, the temporary buildings appeared. They're just the cheapest things we can build instead of tents. So our argument is against the cost of putting a permanent tent up there from Moreton Hire. Budgets got set. They're block buildings, painted with colour, unfinished awnings, etc. This was meant to be the polyclinic for the medical. We'll see that in a minute. Again, it can take an 8-storey building, but it got through. These buildings are actually owned by EDQ now, so they're not owned by the end user of the things. They're owned by EDQ on EDQ land, or state government land, and the colours kept showing up. You've also got, we divvied the buildings up, of course, between the different architects. So everyone had a go at the formula with the colours. So there was a little bit of coordination between us in some 3Ds, but often the compositions were individual. And you can't do this on an infill block. You can't take a street that's got existing buildings on it, put a high-rise up in the middle and colour it like that, because you just look like you're being completely loud and disrespectful to the context in the street. The only way you can do this is when you own the context, when you're doing it to the whole street, and you can actually apply it all the way through. So there is, and there will be, a lot of talk about the colours. There'll be a lot of talk about whether the colours are appropriate. In the architectural community, colours are actually a bit of a no-no. They're, ideally, if you're being a purist and a good architect in the current sense of the day, you'll respect the material. You'll have steel looking like steel, concrete looking like steel, concrete, timber coming in, and you use the colours and materials authentically to display the thing. To use colours seen as a bit of appliqué and risque. So maybe we'll influence that debate and that dialogue, and maybe it'll change. So, the disc. This is where the disc ended up. We had to build the disc. The disc was 24 metres in diameter at the end of the day. It was put in a budget as a single line item again, and no one had any idea how to build it, and it was going to be in concrete, it was going to be in this. It was tried to be reduced, it couldn't be it got reduced from 30 to 24, that's all they'd accept, and we had to deliver the oculus, as we started calling it, the waterfall and the disc. So today's breakfast is sponsored by Shapeshift. Shapeshift is not exactly unknown to us, and certainly ARM, and the brochure you can see in front of you has the very famous William Barak Tower in Melbourne in it, which was a 20-storey tower, and we shape-shifted the balconies to form the face of William Barak, looking straight down the axis at the Shrine of Remembrance. So that's where the face lines up. If you see it in Melbourne from any other place, it sort of starts to get out of focus, but if you look at it from the Shrine of the Remembrance, you get this huge 20-storey face of William Barak, who was one of the early Indigenous leaders looking straight at the Shrine of Remembrance. That's a shape-shift all the balconies there are shapeshift. Oh, or shape shell. Shape shell is actually the product. It's a fibre composite. It's a Gold Coast company that's done very well. They're here today, and the boys that helped are all here today. It's a collaboration, and a wonderful collaboration. We came up with a funny shape that looked like that, 24 metres across. We made a little model of it out of 3D Max. We sent it to Shape Shell and Shapeshift, and that's it. The boys that coordinated the steel created the shells, all of which get made in the factory at Singapore in pieces, brought out, stuck onto a shell, clipped together, produced this building. And it's beautiful. It's a gorgeous thing sitting in the middle, and it's memorable, and the water does fall through, and it does cool it, and it does sound fantastic, and it's a beautiful, memorable thing. And you remember in that earlier diagram we wrapped the buildings around the corner? The problem with that was, and that was a late shift in the master plan, one, they all started facing the wrong way and got bad sun, but also we lost a connection. They created a wall and cut all those other buildings behind off from the main street. So one of the big shifts was this, which we called the Passeggiata. So that's basically a public park walkway through this lot, so the car park's underneath, but it's the pedestrian walkway through and up to those furthest buildings so that you visually but directly connect them back to the heart, which then breaks your duration of your journey on your way up to the train station. All significant sort of moves. That's from inside the disc. You can see the texture. It's basically the same technology that gets used to build ship hulls and boat hulls. This is the oculus. The water pours out, comes down, hits the ground, hits rocks and granite, and then rolls its way into the creek and gets recycled. It got there. It's one of those amazing moments when you have an idea, you put it on the table, and we end up building it 3 or 4 years later. It lights up beautifully at night. It's memorable. It's pure white, so that contrasts all the colours around you, and becomes the main draw card of the heart and the village. Each of the super lots, if you like, so there's A, B, C, D, and E and F, each holding 5 to 6 buildings, all wrap around a central courtyard which has amenities in it, pools. The pools were, under CGB rules, to be all drained and boarded up because they're a danger, they're a hazard. They've broken that rule for us this year. And they've allowed the pools to stay because we are subtropical. So the pools are all in play for the games. All the 72 different countries get allocated either whole buildings. The Australian team, for example, is in Rainforest 1 on Lot A. But if you're a smaller country, you'll get a whole floor or you'll get units. And then the basements have no cars in them, but they all get fitted out. Nearly the whole basements get fitted out with offices and physios and other facilities. A lot of the sort of the landscape elements then started to get shaped and brought into the pattern. You can see the concentration. So, for example, these fins on this building with the panels, we had a very limited amount. You know, when the budgets got cut, the panels got cut, the number of fins got cut. And they're meant to be spread all the way around the building. So we just gathered them all together on the corner that one would have the most impact and two would, do the most protection. Townhouses, 110 townhouses, again used to make streets and scale the streets down and set the buildings back. And then the artwork. This is a great story. I can't see any Melville Haysons here, but often there's a Melville Haysom over there who's a very famous Queensland artist. And Mark Haysom was and is a member of Archipelago, and he worked on the project for 3 years, and we had a budget of $70,000 to decorate 18 foyers of 18 apartment buildings. That's less than $5,000 for each one. It was meant to be a painted plywood panel. That's all we could do. Like, buy the plywood panel, stick it on. Mark said, give me the 70 grand and a couple of months off and I'll go and I'll paint the panels and I'll create 18 artworks. So he took a colour story out of the colour story. He tuned it to all the buildings. he went away for a while, and these panels are, I don't know when, 3 metres by 1 metre, maybe bigger. Three door wings. 3 by 2. Big things, 18 of them. Painted them all, that's just one of them, and took months and months to do it, framed them all himself for the 70 grand, and then Grocon put a big tent up at the end. We had an exhibition of all these 18 artworks, and so as you walk out of the lifts and the foyers, the ground floor, every building's got colour matched and a story to it. And the Melville Haysom is a beautiful picture. It's a big a water seascape that's normally in this room. So that's a typical lot. Here you can see the number of buildings. There's the heart. Here's the buildings stepping all the way around. Townhouses here, the Passaggiata through there, going up to Main Street. You see we did bend the road. That was another good one for the traffic engineers. You've got to have 25 metre curves on all the corners, and then we wanted to bend their road. We said, well, this is your main trunk road coming through that's going to connect into the suburbs. We said, we just want to put a kink in it. Come on, let's bend it around. Again, a great win of urban design influencing roads. All the ground floor apartments had to work, all the foyers had to work, the shared landscape had to work. There's 2 potential retail outlets here, being hopefully cafes and small coffee shops in the future that will populate the plaza. The force main, there's a huge forced sewage main. One of the main Gold Coast forced sewage mains comes through here, so that set that road. Single basements underneath each one. That basically sets the lot size. So here's the number of units we've got, here's the number of cars we need. And as architects, again, really nice to be able to lay out a basement, and if it was really good to have another 3 metres, we could make an efficient basement, then we just moved the road. We just shifted across 3 metres and the basements were all set. The lot sizes were set. The buildings became quite square, but then we held on to the attitude of the fins and panels. Buildings were driven by 2 escapes at each end. That'll be about 39 metres long, 2 lifts in the middle, light and air flowing through the middle of the corridor, and the units. So another huge win for the end users, really, because the CGV brief is basically that you can have two athletes in each bedroom, so no more than 2, and you have to provide a certain size room per athlete. They have to have a certain size distance between the beds. They have to have a certain size bed head beside them, a bedside table beside them, and a certain size wardrobe. And then for every athlete, you must provide a certain square meterage of lounge room within the apartment. All this is in CGF, which is the Federation, Global Federation rules. You can't break it. So what we did was we designed 2-bedroom apartments with lounge dining in the middle and the kitchen at the back, bathrooms at the back, and then for the games, put in 2 temporary walls here and here to create the 3rd bedroom. And the kitchen won't be fitted out. It'll just be a bench at the moment because you can't put a kitchen in. Again, it's a hazard. So they're just 2 bedrooms, a microwave and a kettle, 3 rooms and a place to gather, all set by the rules. What that means is every single 2-bedroom unit, when it's delivered, all 1,200 of them will have over 12 metres of natural light to the front. There's no saddlebacks, there's no snorkels, there's no small bedroom at the back and the big bedroom at the front. Every one of them will have full double windows, big lounge room to the front and the dining room, which again is key worker housing. So normally key worker housing, and certainly build to rent key worker housing, is very small, tight little units, you know, with a very sad 2nd bedroom with a snorkel, maybe a bathroom on the other side. Every one of these will be better than any other 2-bedroom unit on the Gold Coast, and they'll all be key worker housing and they'll all be rented by the same person. So that, again, the legacy benefit of this, you know, starts with the Parklands, gets to the road, gets the park, gets the arbour, and gets the thing. So games mode. So we're in games mode at the moment. The cordon is up. The units have been built for since before Christmas, and now all the blue, here's the temporary permanent buildings, are starting to come in. This is the transport node straight through the welcome mat into the dining hall. The dining hall is a full 2,500 square metre supermarket shell. So the supermarket's not fitted out, it's all temporarily fitted out, and it's not big enough. So we have to put a huge tent on the back of it to supplement it, and that becomes the dining hall. Out of here, through there, straight into the dining hall, and then distributed off into your apartments with your pools and your amenities in the middle. These things all become to do with servicing, provisions, the numbers are extraordinary, numbers of paper rolls that they're going to use over the 3 weeks is extraordinary, and the basement's all full of supplies. Then medical, then security, and then overlays over the top of that. This is zooming in a bit, so I'm going to show you very quickly inside the dining hall. Here's the international zone you can see up here. So there's another slight yellow line you can see around there which keeps everyone out. So the big lines through here, this is your controlled world. This is where other people can arrive, come through another front door, and this is the meet and greet, basically, the welcome mat, the ceremonial area, the flags. So this is Main Street here, walking through the main portico to the retail area of the Lot C, and this is meant to be the front door to a Coles or a Woolly. It's now the main dining room. Huge amounts of temporary kitchen has been brought in. This is for 3 weeks this gets set up. All these are temporary air conditioning ducts, temporary air conditioning units, temporary switchboards, all hired gear, and that's a shot looking back out at the dining hall, looking back at the serveries in the corner. So enormous organisation to pull all that together. These are the flagpoles, which are 72 flagpoles down Main Street that will start to get spread out on the way up. That's the international precincts. That's where all the ceremonies will happen, and there's a temporary deck that we're building for all the important people to stand on. Thousands of these have shown up. They are an unexpected item. They're called HVMs, hostile vehicle mitigators. They're this high, they're this big, they're blue sandbags, filled with sand and moved around by forklifts. Thousands of them on site appeared last week, protecting the perimeter from hostile vehicles. So that's the presentation. This is a fly-through. So the drones have been active. Oops, that's got me, hasn't it? How quickly can I work this? There we go. Can I click this one down here, John? That one? No. That one? No. Oh, yours.
Third time lucky. There you go. It's off.
So this runs for about 3.5 minutes, so I'll just let that run. But any questions? Wow, I've stonkered you all. There's the top. The whole top of that shell is the fibre composite as well, so it's smooth and glossy around all corners, all to the top, right to the oculus. It's beautiful. It's not glass reinforced fibre. It's not fibre reinforced glass. It's glass composite, and the material's actually called shape gel. The landscaping was a good win. A lot of the landscaping was bought years ago and has been growing up in pots in various nurseries around the place. So this landscaping was a real treat when it arrived. There you can see the polyclinic with tents coming in. So this is the polyclinic. Basically all the medical and physio is in there. There's the the really structured view all the way down the passage out into the furthest building, and this side of the road is of the main street is 10 metres wide because it's the sunny side of the street. The DNA, I did fly over the road and connect over the road and cross both roads. That was a value management removal in rather late stage. This is now all owned by Gold Coast City Council, so that's a complete legacy item gift to the Gold Coast City Council. Very interested in the maintenance costs of the water feature, so lots of meetings with them on how to simplify it, and again, thanks to Shapeshift, there's a fantastic solution there. There's the Lap 27 overland flow part for a little bigger a creek, basically being brought back to the surface. Over the top of the supermarket is another landscape, another green roof that we got in. This is the 1 mile run, so there's exactly 1 mile all the way around, and one idea was that it would be called the Ron Clark Run, because he's got the 1 mile record, and that every year people could run it and try and beat his record. He's unfortunately no longer the man, and the townhouses that we use to structure the streets, and again, all of these are under one basement, so in this one, all the way along, out the other end, so we minimise the number of crossovers. The captured landscapes in between the buildings. Transport Mall, this is where the big tent will attach onto the back, going over that road to make the dining hall, and potentially permanence happening here. Yes. Good.
Great presentation, thank you. Clearly, you've produced a beautiful place. Lots of challenges, the colours, obviously one thing you're waiting to see what the reaction will be. Wondering, is there, opening day, happy? Not from an operational point of view, but an architectural, functional point of view. Is there anything you're waiting to see what actually might happen?
Look, the big challenge is architecturally and urban design wise, and I suppose that's a big point here. Urban design is often separated from architecture, and they're complementary or feeding each other. So extraordinary to have the opportunity to be completely in control of both. So how do you put the people, the architecture, the streets, and bring it all together in a way that's meaningful and memorable and purposeful? So the greatest success will be when people show up, be them athletes or especially after the Games. I suppose the real mark of success will be about a year after the Games. We think these will rent their heads off. I think the Games will finish. They'll put these on the market, and they'll be so attractive, they'll rent very quickly. There'll be 2,500 people living here, hopefully, by next Christmas. The goal and the brief, the overriding brief, was always to make place. Here's this wasteland in the middle of a hospital and a university. Make Parklands, which is what it'll be called, and the stock's called Parklands, a knowable, known, memorable place for the people of South East Queensland. If we get there in a year's time next Christmas, and there's kids playing underneath the disc, and the main street's going off, and cafes are trading, and the restaurants have popped into those two retails, and there's 2,500 people plus visitors showing up at the place, and the street is alive, that will be an unbelievable success to have gone from a paddock to a place in 5 years. Think of Kelvin Grove Urban Village. That's 20 years in the making. And South Bank is over 20 years in the making. And both of them, there's always been a lot of talk about when they'll kick in. Like when will the critical mass get there? The streets aren't quite working. They don't feel great. The restaurants keep failing. We just haven't got the critical mass. We need to build another 3 or 4 buildings. We've built 18 buildings in 3 years, and the roads, and laid them out, and put the heart in the disc, and we've got a transport network. If we can get to a working, memorable, successful place in 5 years, that's the greatest tick of success.
Thank you, Andrew. That was fascinating. I'd agree. be great to see go down there in 12 months and see it full of people again. There's nowhere else you build 18 apartment buildings in one go and rent them all in one go. It'd be great to see it happen.
Thank you.
Took about 3 minutes to spare, perfectly timed. We might invite Frank from Shapeshifters up here to vote things.
Thank you, John. We definitely much appreciate you having attended this seminar today. We're definitely honoured to be a sponsor. Also, John, thank you for reading out the bio. I don't need to talk too much about Shapeshift. Firstly, I'd like to thank Brian Woolridge for coordinating this seminar today. Thank you for making that happen. And Andrew, thank you very much for the amazing presentation and commend you for the arduous task of putting this whole Olympic Village together. Just want to make a comment. You said when you were presenting the Arbor area, the DNA structure, you mentioned the typical architects having fun. Well, that's what Shapeshift is all about. We build creativity. So the disc, that's a great example of what we do. We can go even more complex than that. You've all got a brochure in front of you. You can see what we've done and definitely the capabilities of using Shape Shell, which is a lightweight fibre composite material. So go crazy, architects, and just send us anything you want to build and we'll make it happen. Thank you.
Look at that, bang on time yet again, that's always good. Keep your eye up mid-April for the next, our May seminar, which will be great when we know what it is. But have a great day.